Hello and welcome to Swell Season Surf Radio. I'm Tyler Breuer and I'm your co-host for this episode, as I'm being joined today by my good friend, partner in It Doesn't Not Work Surfboard Expo, and an all-around NYC surfing character, Toddy Stewart. Toddy, how's your pie? How you going, mate?
I can't do an Australian accent. It's beyond
It's
me,
okay.
but...
It's okay. Don't worry. There's no pressure. I brought in Toddy for this interview because our guest is a personal hero for both Toddy and I. Our guest is a filmmaker, photographer, writer, and creative director for the Great Ocean Quarterly. He made the revolutionary performance project, which culminated in a multi-award-winning documentary, Musica Surfica, which was followed up by the Reef. Our guest for this episode is Mick Sowry. So we're really excited to have him on. But before we dive into it, I need to mention that Swell Season is recorded by the Newsstand Studio in Rockefeller Center in the heart of Manhattan and is distributed by WAX.Radio. Now, Toddy, before we introduce Mick, can we give our listeners a brief overview of what type of guy Mick is and why we fawn over him so much?
I've known Mick since you did the very first New York Surf Film Festival.
Yep.
When was that? 2008?
2008, exactly.
That was, and we both had films in that festival. His was Musica Surfica. And I remember thinking, oh, good, there's another person who wants to bring in other aspects of life into surfing, that is kind of interested in the whole multitude of observations and stuff. And then I met Mick, and I was just thinking, you asked me to be on this podcast, and I was like, I want to talk to Mick. I haven't talked to him like in person in so long. And it's because he's sort of, he's one of the only kind of surfing elders that I know well, intimately, in a way, because he's a friend. And there's those surf elders that are out there that you know about because they're these great big surf media kind of icons. And then there's surf elders that are just kind of quietly going about being the wisest men and women around. The people who are kind of, been around, done it all, and have the wisdom that you just want to talk to all the time, who can point you in the right direction. And Mick is that guy. He's one of them. And it's super, super exciting to talk to him.
Well, let's bring our guest on the show. Mick, welcome to Swell Season. How's your pie? I know you're just probably either oh God, I got to listen to all this and it's going to be really embarrassing. Or I thought you were going to jump in and say, fuck off. Come on.
No, I don't do fuck off on the radio. Although I just did.
So good to have you on, Mick. Thanks for coming, man.
No,
really.
I'm a bit, because I went through and looked at your cast of thousands in previous podcasts, and I was getting a little bit like, why the hell's he got me on? So,
well,
classic.
Mick, you only made probably one of my favorite surf movies of all time. It's always in my top 5 is Musica Surfica. It's, when I saw that movie, when we previewed it to maybe screen in the New York Surf Film Festival back in 2008, I remember seeing it and just, we watched so many movies leading up to it. And you saw the gambit, really slick, high-end sponsored stuff to, the stuff people made on their little, camcorders or whatnot. And yours just was holy fuck, this is amazing. This is beyond anything I've ever seen in surf. It really just took two creative forces, brought them together, and challenged the notion of a surf movie in some ways. And that to me was just the gold standard of any sort of surf film. After that, it's it always measures. I always use that as the measuring rod for me.
Wow. Well, it was, doing that was a kind of, because the history of it, and I'd how much time have I got? Because there's quite a story.
We got all night or all day for you.
That's fine.
But,
well, there you go. I'll give that. You go on.
Give our listeners a little bit of an overview of what Musica Surfica was, if possible.
I can do it in two ways. It started for me when I'd actually, through circumstances, just through surfing for a long time, oddly enough, had come to know Wayne Lynch and Nat Young through just going surfing and bumping into them and stuff like that. And the original thing had been I left advertising in about 2005, sold our house, and you guys know this story, but I wanted to make a film that was revisiting evolution 40 years later. And and that was going to be called A Sublime Pleasure, I think it was. I was trying to remember it. I'd approached Nat, and he'd sort of given it his sort of nod, and Wayne likewise. And we sold the house so that I had some money, and trying to free myself from the advertising industry. And anyway, I'd started doing the filming, and I approached Richard Tognetti from the Australian Chamber Orchestra to do the sound design. And Richard, because of his, sorry about the ums, you'll have to cut those out. And
it up, man. No worries.
And anyway, Richard I sent him an email to the reception of the Australian Chamber Orchestra, and I got a phone call from him about 3 hours later, and he said, "I'm in," and I nearly fell over. And then about 2 months later, he rang me and said, "I'm at the Hamer Hall in Melbourne, which is a big concert hall here, and there's a couple of tickets on the reception, and would you like to come in? I want to have a chat with you." And that was the start of it, because he told me, like, after the concert, I met up with him. Actually, he said, "Come to this party." So it was like pretty weird. But anyway, we went to the party, and he told me about the whole idea of going to King Island and surfing without fins. And I said, "Well, why do you want me along?" And he said, "Well, I want you to film it. And then what we want to do is play the footage, behind the orchestra." And it was almost, in a sense, it was the early progenitor of the Reef, though I didn't realise that at the time. And I said, "Well, why are you doing it?" And he said, "Well, the other thing is we're doing it finless." And I'm going, holy shit, okay, right, And this is before finless was a thing, apart from Hot Curl in 1948 and years prior. And so a bit more conversation came out of that, and that whole idea of risk in learning was the thing that he said to me. And so over the next couple of days, I wrote a treatment, and I said, "I think there's more to this than just me shooting behind this, doing this so you can shoot behind it or show it behind." And that treatment got sent to the boss at the ACO, and he gave it to a board member who passed it on to Kim Williams, who was the head of Foxtel, and Foxtel gave us some money. And suddenly I went, all righty, because I was actually going to throw in and go down to King Island and just throw in some of the house money to do it, because I was so keen to do it. And then so we went down to King Island, and it was just this mad, like Derek was obviously there, Derek Hynd, and that was a whole other thing. And I had actually stepping back a bit. Well, that was gigantic actually. And Derek insisted on meeting me, so we met up for a pizza in St Kilda, where I lived in a suburb of Melbourne. And it's and to me, Derek was a very notable surfer back then, because I was a huge fan of Litmus. And so we had a pizza and agreed on lots of things, and realised that we could probably work together. And then I found myself down on King Island, and it was just this mad shooting thing. And by then I'd hooked in Johnny Frank as my camera, or main, water camera. And I had another guy who was a specialist land guy, and we just shot the hell out of it. But in the meantime, what I'd done was write a lot of interviews and also storyboard a few scenes, that particular things that I had ideas about, that like the guys running along the beach at Martha's right at the beginning, that was storyboarded. I just sort of like did a bit. I think I might have even done a bit of Google Earthing type of stuff to figure out the lay of the land there. So we got all the footage, and that was just one of the most wonderful periods of my life, that shoot. Every person that was on that shoot is lifelong friends now.
I mean, like Tom Carroll, Sage Josk, like, I mean, it's kind of amazing, like some of the names.
The crew, well, Sage Josky, Tommy Carroll, Derek, Tommy Wegener, like classic characters, and we're still all friends. I still speak to Sage, and Heath Josky came down too, and Tommy Carroll, and, Nick Carroll comes and stays at my place at Easter. I became friends through them. That it was just this like minds in a funny sort of way. And Tommy was, I think at the time, it's an open story, but he was, in that sort of early drug recovery stage. And he'd brought his little daughter Gracie down, and Gracie was like, I think about 4. Wow. And it was just fantastic. So, but got back and I started to cut it, and I couldn't edit then. I was learning how to edit.
We got to also mention, like, meanwhile, like, you had the Australian Chamber Orchestra recording music there on King Island. I got to mention, because, like, that's pretty amazing. Is like they were able to, you had them making music for the surfing of sorts.
Yeah, so thanks, Ty, because how did I forget that? So through this whole thing, the orchestra was rehearsing a concert tour, and we had 3 members of the orchestra in Richard Tognetti, Satu Vanska, and who later became his wife, and Julian Thompson, who was the cellist. Plus we had Danny Spooner and Mike Kerrin, who were like folk singer and fiddler, and that mix of us. Like every night there'd be music going on, and 3 times we did concerts for the locals. We did a concert in the Cheese Factory, which was that absurd thing at the beginning of the film, which was just like 10 surfers and a $14 million violin or whatever it was, and a couple of farmers from up the road, and we'd never heard that level of music. Nobody had live in such an intimate space, and the Cheese Factory was actually owned by Derek. I think it still might be. Yeah,
Derek owns a cheese factory?
Well, it's an empty shed, but...
Oh. I'm just like imagining him making cheese, like, hey, boys, come on in.
No, but it's a wonderful acoustic space. So that was sort of quite good for that. And that was the first night. There were a few events around it. All through this was Derek's like long... His character, as everybody knows his character, it's quite mercurial and intensely intellectual, and a little bit paranoid at times. You might go, because, and I don't say that in a psychologically bad way, but he's got such strong feelings about the world that you go, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I might not agree with that, but I'm going to have to roll with it, that type of thing. And he's a wonderful guy, and we've actually become really good friends over the years with sort of like
some ups and downs, though.
Because like I say, he's a bit one-eyed about things, and I say that without
literally. No pun intended, right? For those of our listeners who may not be aware, Derek Hynd has one eye.
I really do, because you can't not respect it, or as we call him, Drek. It's so funny. So we had all these concerts. We did a concert for the townsfolk. We did a concert for the kids, and